coworker, and he
Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Welcome to the American Foreign Policy Review today. I'm your host, Carlo Parcelli. We also have co-hosts Billy Bob and Ben Toth. Billy Bob coming from the left coast of the United States of America, and Ben coming directly from Hungary. And our special guest today, once again, is Regis Tremblay from Crimea, Russia. And today our opening topic is going to be Putin's speech, and we'd like to get right into it. And we want to go right to Regis. Regis, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always
Thank you for coming.
It's always good to be with you. For a lot of people, Putin's speech was underwhelming. There were a lot of people that thought, "Oh my God, he's going to make some big statement about the war in Ukraine. He's going to drop a 10,000-pound bomb on Kiev or, on that Donbass area and stop the shelling." There was none of that. I watched it a couple of times, and I also read the speech. I read several analysis of his speech by different people. But here's what I would like to share with you tonight. 2/3 of Putin's speech was on domestic issues. And this part of the speech was quite long. He talked for almost 2 hours. He addressed the Russian economy as not only being stable, but improving and increasing. He talked about the banks. The Russian banks made profits last year. Not great, but modest profits. He talked about the growth in several sectors, agriculture especially, which is booming. He basically said, we are self-sustaining now, reassuring the Russian people that things were good in spite of the sanctions. The other audience for this message was definitely the West, the United States. You've been lied to. People have been telling you that, the Russian economy is collapsing and Putin is weak and they're going to remove him. This message was for the rest of the world as well. Now I want to focus on what I think the rest of the world really needs to hear is the beginning and the very end when he talked about the conflict in Ukraine. He made it very clear that Russia has tried from the beginning to find a peaceful solution. The Minsk I and the Minsk II agreements. And he said, we were lied to and we were deceived. He said the proof was from Angela Merkel, who was then the Prime Minister of Germany, from France, Hollande, Poroshenko, former president of Ukraine, and Zelensky himself. All four admitted that the Minsk I and Minsk II were a ruse to trick and deceive Russia into thinking they wanted peace when they really wanted to buy time to build up the war machine. I thought this was a huge point that he made. He wanted to make it clear that Russia knew that it had been deceived. He talked about openly Nazis in Ukraine, the influence that they had, not only in the government, but in fighting. He also said, and this is justification for the special military operation, Kiev has been wanting a nuclear weapon for a long time. He talked about the biolabs in Ukraine. He talked about the United States and the West openly admitting that their intention was to destroy Russia. They made this openly, and he pointed that out. He pointed to the United States and NATO for what they had done in Yugoslavia, Libya, and Syria, and obviously now for the last 9 years in Donbass. I thought that this was incredibly powerful, that Putin was really calling out, and I think it was the United States. He did mention the United States directly several times. He said the United States has got 800 bases. Well, he didn't say 800. He said hundreds of bases around the world, but the number is around 800. He said that the United States unilaterally left all of the arms agreement. He made a big point of talking about New START treaty, that Russia was going to suspend its involvement in it, not back out. And the reason for that was, he said, the Americans will not let us inspect any of their installations, nuclear, manufacturing, and sites. And so we're not going to let them inspect ours. This caused people in the West to go nuts. They said, oh, they twisted the whole story. Look, Russia doesn't care, and et cetera, et cetera. Putin also made a big point about the West not keeping its promise at the fall of the Soviet Union and the end of the Warsaw Pact in 1991, that they wouldn't move 1 inch, centimeter, yard, whatever measure you want, it's very small, towards Russia. And he said now they have, in almost all of the former Soviet republics, they're directly on our borders. They're performing war games simulating an attack on Russia. He said that in December of 2021, we submitted our draft proposal for our security guarantees. He said it was ignored by America, the United States, NATO, and the OSCE, and the EU. They completely ignored it. He basically was saying, we don't trust them. They're not trustworthy to enter into any kind of agreements or negotiations. I thought this was huge. The other thing that he said, and he made it very clear, the United States and the West unleashed this war. We will finish it. I thought that was an incredibly powerful statement, not only as a message to the West, to the United States, to the EU, and to NATO, but to the American people, because he appealed to history, where Russia has defeated and driven out every foreign invader, going back to Sweden and Finland, France and Napoleon, and Germany in World War II. And he said, we will win again today. He ended his speech with this message: we will win, and we have truth on our side. I think this was an incredible, balanced, well-tempered, but very clear message, not only to the Russian people, but to the United States and NATO. I'll throw it out to you guys to see what you thought of the speech.
Shall we go around? Because we all watched it live. I'm wondering, everybody's had favorite or least favorite parts of the speech. Clockwise, who wants to jump?
Why don't you begin, Ben?
Ooh, okay. So first of all, in the beginning, I want to contrast it with Joe Biden's insane appearance in first Kiev and then Warsaw, Poland. It was just, he was walking in to, I bring freedom, a song like that. He used freedom all the time. It was insulting. It was incredibly unhinged, what he did there. And he was there on basically at the not the behest, he got a safe pass, a safe conduct, a 24-hour pass from Vladimir Putin to appear there and get his little Hall of Fame slab on the ground with fake air sirens, and then left and went back to Poland and fell off the jet. That was his performance, absolutely unhinged. On the other hand, Putin, we started. This was, to me, a young, healthy man. I'm 40. I look worse than Putin does today. Full confidence. Seriously, the winds of history at his back, especially when he talked about the economy. Like, we weathered the storm, guys. We're already growing. Everything they threw at us, including the EU, just failed to initiate, I don't know, round 11 of sanctions. They couldn't come to terms with whatever it will be. We weathered the storm. We're moving on. We're going to grow. And for me, you mentioned some people were disappointed. Some people were not disappointed, but they wanted more. Some people were expecting the upgrade of the special military operation to anti-terrorist operation. Other people were expecting full mobilization, declaration of war, that sort of thing. I didn't expect that. What I really liked was the educational reforms, especially going back to teachers being respected. It's basically the Soviet system returning in that. And a lot of the social factors were that sort of not Soviet, but the good side from the Soviet system, basically in return. I really love that. And that was the point when I saw Gennady Zyuganov, the leader of the KPRF, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, the second largest party in Russia. He looked up. For the rest of the speech, he was pretty much minding his business on his phone. But I heard him speak. For me, there was a second topic which was interesting. It was the appeal to oligarchs who left, the treacherous oligarchs to it was basically just an appeal. Come back home. You're second-class citizens in the West. They can steal your yachts. They can steal your mansions. Come back home, invest in Russia, and you will be not only treated fairly, but you can basically be a part of your homeland, your one and only homeland. I love that part. What for me was disappointing, to be honest with you, was a lack of nationalization. I felt as though there were other appeals to other Russian businessmen and industrialists, which was incentives and appeals. And I thought he had the mandate. He could do anything. He could, important sectors, most of it in Russia is national, but he could have done a lot more, and the people would have been 100% behind him, as was proven by this speech and the next day, the concert at Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow, which everybody has to see. It was the most emotional thing in the world. Apparently more Ukrainians watched that than they did Zelensky's New Year's speech, and they did the Ukrainian-Wales big match in FIFA. And just for an idea, Russian language banned in Ukraine forever. They played Ukrainian music and also subtitled it from the Russian people at this concert, as well as Katyusha and a million Russian flags, just to get an idea of how much the people are behind the big bad autocrat or dictator, or whatever Biden likes to call him. In the East. That would have been my big takeaways. It was emotional. It was brilliant, historic, really.
Wow,
Billy
thanks for
Bob.
that, Ben. That was incredible. Thank you so much for that insight, because I think it's really important for people to hear that and what you just explained. Terrific.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys have great takes on the speech, much better than mine. I didn't even watch the entirety of the speech. I read some parts of it. I like what Regis said at the beginning. A lot of people were expecting, a big kind of war announcement or an escalation, something like that. And that didn't happen. But I think Putin kind of represents a real thoughtful approach, right? He's not going to get hot-headed, and he's not going to respond in in an irrational manner, an emotional manner to the provocations from the West. And I think that's really important. That's what's great about Putin. But he does have his critics on the right, that want a more stronger, more, militaristic kind of thing. And they're a small minority. I think the vast majority of the Russian people appreciate Putin for the reasons you guys just described, that, he's smart, and, he really does have the support of the vast majority. I have a Russian coworker, and it's strange. I had never heard this opinion before, but apparently Prigozhin, for the CEO of Wagner, he's quite popular. He has quite a popular following, and My coworker actually thinks that he would like Prigozhin to be the kind of strong, tough leader that he feels that Putin isn't. So, and again, that's a very minority opinion. That doesn't represent the mainstream, but it is a a strain of thought within a minority strain of thought within Russia. But those are some of the thoughts I had. I thought it was a great speech. I appreciate Putin for the same reason the vast majority of Russians appreciate Putin. Thoughtful, even-handed, steady, and in the right. He has truth on his side. There's no doubt about it.
Well, that's interesting because um, I have really nothing to add that beyond what you guys said. I was very impressed. It was a history lesson for me in many regards, and it was the kind of statesmanship that is long gone from the U.S. Political theater. We're talking about making the AR-15 the national gun. So that's how stupid America is. And we can sort of dispense. If stupid really was going to be the factor that was going to destroy the United States, it would already be have crumbled. And so obviously there's a little bit more going on. But the Prigozhin thing is interesting because this week Prigozhin doubled down on his "you're not sending enough weapons to the Wagner group in the Bakhmut region," and I would like to get everybody's take on this rift between the the Russian military and Prigozhin. Is it all just thunder and lightning, or
I think Regis should go first on that one. I followed it, but what do you think?
Let's go.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what to believe. I read something that Putin doesn't like Prigozhin because he's so powerful and so popular, and he might see him as a threat. And therefore, Putin is not willing to send him all of the ammunition and weapons.
That sounds.
I have a hard time believing that one. I think, and not being plugged into the Kremlin and to the Russian military of defense. From my perspective, he may have a legitimate reason to say that what's going on? Why are you not sending me enough? Because my guys are carrying the fight in Bakhmut. We're the ones that are dying, and my guys are going to keep dying if you don't give us enough weapons and you don't give us enough ammunition. So I don't know what to make of that. I think it's pure speculation on everybody's part what is really going on.
Yeah.
I do want to say this, and then I'll send it to wherever, to Ben or Billy Bob. Billy Bob, your characterization of Putin was exactly on point. It was a classic Putin speech. Well prepared, confident, calm, incredible delivery, and he showed the confidence of somebody, a leader who knows what he's about. Anyway, so let's get back to the Wagner Group.
Oh, sorry, and with zero insults. There wasn't a mention of Biden, of Baerbock, of anybody. There were none of the insults that Biden likes to do. It was just factual, to the point, structured, lovely. For the Wagner, I have a couple of observations. One of them I owe to Alexander Mercouris of the Duran is, if you don't get enough ammunition, for the last 6 or 7 days, there has only been advance around Artyomovsk or Bakhmut. You don't really advance if you don't get enough ammunition. And the front has always moved in favor of the Wagner Group. Again, don't want to speculate, but that's sort of odd. And the latest I've heard is that they have got, so maybe this was a spat between the Russian Foreign Ministry and Prigozhin, but they have got the ammunition, according to Prigozhin. I'm not sure it's significant, but I don't know, of course, what's going on behind the scenes. But yeah, you surprised me during our last chat when this story was developing.
To carry the Alex the Alex McCoras thing a little further, I was impressed by the litany of artillery cover that was essentially that McCoras ran down. That was from a document from
From the Russian
Russian military. I mean,
military, yeah.
and if you're getting that much cover fire, that's how you advance. I mean, uh, 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers in a very short period. So that made a whole lot of, you know, I'm not a military guy by any stretch of the imagination, but I read a few books, and that made a lot of strategic sense to me to come back with that. Um, I mean, Billy Bob, what do you have to say?
I would just, say the obvious. Like, if there's ever a time for everybody to get on the same page and work together and keep your differences quiet, I mean, now is the time. So it's disappointing to see this Prigozhin, openly complaining, and now's not the time for that. And I don't know what's going on, what's causing it. I don't know who has justice on their side, who is right. But now is not the time to be airing those differences. It's time to work together, support each other. So it's disappointing. But I mean, the facts on the ground are still, definitely in Russia's favor, and the line continues to head west. So that's important. But I'd like these differences to be squashed, and I want everybody to be on the same page.
Yeah,
well, I have another question. Other than your metaphorical description of "stop the war," thanks, Billy Bob. That was, I could see the same argument developing around that. But I wanted to ask, especially Regis and Ben. I keep hearing that European corporations are now moving or preparing to move to the United States to cut down on their overhead, essentially, where wages are lower, there's fewer unions, and of course, oil and gas prices are lower. Does anyone have any insight into that? I can't really find any kind of substantial movement in that regard, even potentially myself.
If we want me to go first, this is absolutely true, especially for Germany. But since that's the heart of European industry, anything built on that is also true, but partially to America based on stable prices, also to China. BMW and BASF, a huge chemical manufacturer, were the first to we're investing in China. We got the same stable prices, better workforce, just better overall. So the European industry with Germany at the heart, just imagine energy. So gas prices, after the Nord Stream catastrophe and now buying liquefied natural gas from the United States, went from between 6 and 7 times the original price, 4 times the prices in America, right? So you are a big manufacturing line or an aluminium smelter. Creating your final product now became 6 or 7 times more expensive. That means you're out of the market, out of the Chinese market, out of the European, out of the American market. They have no choice. This is what I call the deindustrialization of Europe, with basically one of the last big industrial nations, Germany, at the heart of it. So I'd say there's plenty to this story. There's 100-year-old factories, porcelain manufacturers, even like soft drink makers just shutting down, and they say, we'll bring it back later. Like, I don't think these things are going to relaunch, but I can substantiate that. This is America. This is why Nord Stream happened.
Even with retooling costs?
Yeah, even with that, they still have capital too. But
and I think that was probably behind the United States actions, is to try to cripple Germany and thereby the European economy, to tempt these companies to move back to the United States, which lost their entire industrial base with from Clinton and NAFTA, and then everybody going to China. Why would a German company ever think, and these people who run them and own them, that we're going to be treated better in America after they've destroyed us?
These are your allies?
We'd go to China first, and then who knows what they're going to do. Like Ben, maybe you're right.
And
some of
Germany
these-
says nothing. They
Yeah.
just stand there.
Yeah,
That's what
It's-
I don't understand.
yeah, it's really crazy. It's really crazy. And the other thing that I would add to this is Russia has made it clear that it's done with the West. It's done
Oh,
with the United States. It's done with the EU. It's done with NATO. It's moving east. Putin mentioned that in his speech. New corridors of transportation and trade. He's talking about going to China, Asia. He's talking about going to the Middle East, Iran. He's talking about going to Africa and South America. He's made it clear, and by their actions, not just their words, Russia, not since the speech several months ago, has been moving towards the east, has been moving towards trading in their own currencies, not based on fiat dollars, but based on goods. This has been going on for the last at least year and at rapid pace. And so I think Putin mentioned that in his speech. We're done with those guys. We're moving east. I mean, I don't know if Germany got on its knees, left NATO, left the EU, and pleaded with Russia, oh, please take us back. I'm not sure that Russia would.
I can bring you document evidence for that if you allow me, just a little bit of context. This has been fact. I mean, for a year, this has been slowly happening. But what happened the next day? The New START treaty that you touched on, which was arms control, nuclear arms control, was suspended. That's a key phrase. It can be brought back to life later. But something else has been nullified, which was the Russian Foreign Policy Decree number 605 of May 7, 2012, which included cooperation and rule of law agreements between the G20, the G8, now G7, and something called the Customs Union, which doesn't exist. Strategic objectives, shared strategic objectives with the European Union to create a single economic and human space from the Atlantic to the Pacific. That's dead. Support of the activities of the European Council. Russia has left it. There are no obligations left. Activities within the framework of Russia-NATO Council. And the final one, which we might get to on the second half of the show, finding a solution to the Transnistrian problem with Moldova, which is obviously flared up in the last few days. But this document hasn't been suspended. It was nullified. I haven't seen a clearer signal that we're done. It's what you said in the beginning. We've been basically taken for a ride. We can't trust these people. They have treated it as fools for now 9 years. And it's obvious we can't trust them. We have divorced. I couldn't be happier for Russia. Obviously, I have my worries because Hungary is still, partially in the west of where we will be. But I couldn't be happier for this.
Billy Bob, you got anything to add?
I do want to talk about the Transnistria thing. That's pretty big. Also, China's peace deal that they're going to present. That is very interesting to me. And when I first heard about it, I wasn't like excited. I was like a little worried. I'm not sure that that's gonna. We will see how that plays out. But the Western media, of course, is gonna dismiss it. And then some people in Russia might be upset, like, oh, China wants us to compromise on this. So I'm a little apprehensive about it. But I think we're gonna take a break.
Yeah, pretty soon.
Yeah, but that's a good point. That's from Transnistria to China. That's what we'll get back to, I think.
Yeah. Also, I was wanted to hear. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Michael Hudson's position on the fundamental reason for this conflict, and he calls it he says Ukraine is like a minor facet in this. It's really a global economic conflict that we should discuss.
It is.
And I think we will take a break right now, unless you guys want to hear me go on about how much I love dodecaphonic music again. I mean, maybe that's in the office.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer. This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely convince you.
And we're back. And obviously, the producer doesn't want me talking about dodecaphonic music and my love of Arnold Schoenberg. So let's go back to Michael Hudson's position, if anybody's familiar with that. Does anybody want to elaborate on that?
His position on what again?
Well, I was curious because he and Ben Norton they've aligned their programs together, and the thrust of it is that the economic factors that are involved, more than the political and the military factors. They say that that's what's really driving. I mean, in a way, it's fairly obvious that that's what's driving this whole series of conflicts that are arising. Actually, you could include Ethiopia in this if you wanted, and the hostility between the United States and NATO, actually in Ethiopia and Eritrea. I mean, it's really goes far abroad. You could include the coup in Peru as being a factor in all this. It has world consequences, and I wondered if anyone wanted to elaborate on that, or we could move right into Transnistria.
I mean, I would say that Michael Hudson is absolutely correct. It's the displacement of the U.S. dollar hegemony that is driving the driving factor. As the economic power of the West declines, they're trying to figure out ways how to maintain it, which includes subverting Russia and China. I mean, but those are the three. There's the economic, there's the political, and the military.
I'd like to add a bit of context, especially regarding China. Yes, it's not just civilizational, but what we call, the fair world order, which is already here. Lavrov always talks about this. But China, and last week we had Regis Tremblay's account of how Russians feel about the Chinese, and there was some mistrust. I'm hoping that this week maybe that has changed, because China's stance has been from their own documents and papers from the foreign ministry have been just. I wish I found the bombastic is the word. Not just forcing the Nord Stream. We want an international investigation. But we had the Munich Security Conference where, Annalena Baerbock said Putin has to do a 360-degree turn, which he did. So we're all good. And there was a lot of panic because all that China said is we are going to release this, white paper, definition paper about the conflict and our stance in peace. That was all. That it wasn't a peace plan. There was never a peace plan mentioned. And everybody in the West panicked. This could be a red line because if they enter an alliance, if they send ammunition, this will be a red line for us. And just last week, all week, the news was about NATO running out of ammo. We don't have the production. And suddenly they have projected that onto Russia. Russia's just about to run out of ammo, so we have to stop China from supplying ammunition they never wanted. Last week it was Iran. Before that it was North Korea. We have to stop these ammo alignments, which is, to me, is ridiculous. And then China released a paper, which comes straight from the foreign ministry. It is titled U.S. Hegemony and Its Perils. And it's filled with everything you can expect. It's about the absolute hypocrisy, the starting of color revolutions, the meddling in democracy, everything that's bad for the world. And it didn't mention Russia. It didn't mention Ukraine. This isn't a peace plan. But boy, are they in a huge panic about China and Russia. This alliance, which isn't an alliance, is stronger than one, just not budging. It's just not breaking, no matter what they do. And Europe, I don't know if it was Borrell or someone else, someone this week, Europe cannot exist without the raw resources of Russia and the markets of China. We just can't. Just imagine that. That's a hefty statement, is what I thought. And that's what the new economic world order, the fair world order, is about. It will be based on commodities that everybody needs. You need energy, you need heating, water, the basics. Everybody wants wheat, everybody wants oil. These have been under the mechanisms of the, what we call it, the rules-based order, always underpriced. Because in New York, in London, there's this casino they call the stock exchange, which is basically playing on predictions, which aren't worth anything in the face of real raw commodities and their input. And that's just being replaced like faster than ever. Just too contemporary. Just this week, the Iraqi central bank has dropped all USDs in favor of the yuan, and Wall Street has had its worst day of just this year. Just too little headline. It is rapidly changing. Ukraine is not a skirmish. It is the main front line, but it goes from there all the way along the north-south transport corridor, something that Vladimir Putin also mentioned. I was happy because it's very important. Of this massive divorce. It's just happened. I mean, there's basically the first Iron Curtain was dropped by bloody the butcher of Bengal, Winston Churchill. This one, I think, is dropped by the East. And you know who came out with the previous one, the winner? Unfortunately, it was the West. I can see who's coming out winning on the other end of this one.
Let me just add on to that, and then I want to hear what Regis has to say. But to support, what you're saying between the Russia and China having stronger than alliance. So since 2020, Chinese exports to Russia went from 50 billion, and then that was 2020, 2022, it's up to 70 billion. So, not doubling, but, at least up, 50%. And then Russian exports of energy exports to China have doubled as well. So there's just a huge increase in economic relations between China and Russia, and I think that's what's really helping to stabilize the Russian economy. And so I think China is doing a lot to benefit Russia, and it's helpful for both because China needs that energy. They're developing, so it's great. It's symbiotic and it's stronger than an alliance. So Regis,
well. Let me just say very briefly,
Carlo.
Two things. Change from Iraq changing to the yuan. They must remember that that's what got Saddam. And secondly, Ben mentioning wheat and oil. That's what the U.S. is stealing from Syria.
Yes.
Take it away, Regis.
Well, I've been saying for a long time. This conflict in Ukraine is really not what it's all about, not what people should be focusing on. They should be focusing on this larger geopolitical landscape that we're starting to talk about right now. And what does that entail? We've talked about it here before. It's not just Russia and China increasing trade both ways and in their own currencies. It's Russia with Iran, it's Russia with India, it's Russia with a number of other countries. Russia's economic plan has been, and it's openly stated, we will trade with anybody who's honest and friendly, and we will trade fairly. And so you put all of this together and you look at the BRICS plus, you look at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in the East, all of them are rapidly moving towards creating their own international monetary fund, their own World Bank. China's well on the way. These people are looking to trade in their own currencies and no longer rely on the United States petrodollar. The United Arab Republic, the Saudis, have signed on to this. My God, Russia is selling oil and gas to Saudis who turn around and sell it for a profit somewhere else. I mean,
India does the same. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And India does the same. And so even somebody who I think is a minus habens, in Latin, it's having less up here, like Anthony Blinken,
Jesus, yeah.
The rest of them have got to see the handwriting on the wall. And I would say it's not handwriting, it's spray painted everywhere. That they do know that their power over the rest of the world, they know that their economy is being threatened. And the only tool they have left is no longer diplomacy, it's war, it's chaos, it's destabilization, it's color revolutions. And, and that's what they're using to try to maintain their hegemony.
Yeah.
And the danger is, will they be so stupid, irrational, and evil to take the whole world down with them in a nuclear Armageddon, rather than accept their rightful place among all nations as just one among equals?
But
Big question.
speaking of that choice, that brings us right to Moldova and Transnistria. Are they going to do some very provocative maneuvering in that country, because the government, the pro-Western government, has essentially toppled, right? The pro-Western government in Moldova collapsed. There's somewhat of a power vacuum, and last night coming home from work, I hear that the Russian Defense Ministry is warning of a Ukrainian operation to seize all the warehouses with a whole year's worth of artillery ammunition, which will solve a lot of Ukraine's problems if they can get their filthy hands on that ammunition. So that would be a huge escalation. How would Russia respond? Is that something the West would risk? I mean, you're risking nuclear retaliation at that point. You're widening the war, but it's of course the kind of thing that the West would jump at doing, knowing the West. But it's insane, and it's entirely unnecessarily provocative. But what do you guys have any predictions for Moldova?
I'm opening the floor.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
I have context. As usual, I don't really have predictions. Moldova is like, right now, the protest capital of the entirety of Eastern Europe, the second poorest country after Ukraine. Apparently, 70% of household expenses goes towards energy. Just imagine what life is like there. And there's apparently this new prime minister appointed, not elected, but the main thing is, I think this was yesterday or today, to bring the protest, basically break the protests and to demilitarize the Transnistrian region, which has been that declared independent region since the country's existence, since 1991, since it broke from the Ukrainian SSR, when it declared independence. It's hot, but it's not the only path. Kosovo is still not a calm place. Obviously, I just read that there was a special unit of sappers sent from Poland into Ukraine, which can also be considered an escalation. So the question is, this cornered, wounded dog that is the Western Empire, will it be stupid enough to really risk that? Because I watched Scott Ritter is the authority on weapons of mass destruction and the New START Treaty and that sort of thing. And even when they said decommission, they tricked the Russians one time after the other. The Russians showed them, this is us chainsawing it, putting it to bits. You see, that can't be made again. And what the US showed on camera with their rocket is, oh, look, we'll snip these cables. See, it's decommissioned. But that means you can recommission it tomorrow. So constantly, they didn't adhere to the rules they set out. They fooled the people. I hope that there's sane people in the strategic forces in the Pentagon who know that's the end of them and everything. But, who knows? I mean, even if Biden's old dead hand reaches that red button, I hope there's someone there to say no. I don't know if it's worth speculating if they're stupid enough for something like that, because what is there to talk about then?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
ahead.
In addition to what's happening in Moldova with Transnistria, what's happening in Croatia and Serbia, in that region, the United States is meddling. And they're meddling in Georgia right now.
Yes.
To try to destabilize that country. Georgia is a neighbor of Russia.
Birthplace of Stalin.
Yeah. Yeah. And, 1991-92, Georgia fought this horrendous war with Abkhazia. And the United States is in there meddling with that. Um, the CIA, State Department, I think it's basically the CIA, they are a rogue agency. They're out of control. Uh, they are looking to implement this neo-conservative, whatever it is, policy around the world. And there's many of them. They are legion. They are everywhere. They didn't just appear on the scene. Uh, they've been working and funding NGOs. Um, and so I really think that this situation that we're looking at just in this part of the world, don't mention the Middle East and Israel and Palestine and the rest of the Arab countries. This is a powder keg. And it's not going to take much, in my opinion, to explode it.
What a nice time just after the earthquake for Israel to strike Damascus again, to strike Syria.
Exactly. And it also reported that Netanyahu has been meeting with his generals, supposedly planning an attack on Iran. Now, how freaking crazy is that?
Yeah.
So this is, I don't think people realize enough the larger context. We have the rallies across the United States yesterday, Rage Against the War Machine. Somewhat underwhelming as far as I'm concerned in Washington. A lot of groups not wanting to work together, saying we're not going to show up because we don't want to be with X, Y, or Z. And they're focused on end the war and NATO. And I'm scratching my head and I'm saying, holy smokes, you people don't understand that we might be living in the final times with all of what we're talking about around the world. A flashpoint could happen tonight.
Yeah.
And not a deliberate action, by accident, a misjudgment. Somebody misreads a computer screen. We are so close to complete total annihilation. It frightens me, and it frightens me more that most people do not understand how serious the situation is that we're in.
It was 60 years ago, wasn't it? The Cuban Missile Crisis, when Vasily Akhripov, he was the first officer on that submarine which lost contact with Moscow. And the protocol was, if you lose contact, consider it destroyed, launch the nukes. And he saved the world. Who knows if we'll have a second Vasily Akhripov this time around.
Right.
It is scary. Absolutely. Can I give a bit of historic hope in the end of this?
Of course.
If you don't look at just the colonies, Japan, South Korea, Germany, as it has become obvious, if you look at other attacks for the last 50 years, a lot of them have failed, starting with Korea, because South might be occupied, but the North still isn't, and it sent ICBMs around the world just lately. They tried Chechnya. They tried attacking China through the Uyghurs in Tibet, through Tibet, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. They tried the Hong Kong thing. They tried the same with Belarus, and it was stopped immediately. In Hungary, who knows if they'll succeed or not. But there's been most of the attacks. They ran from Afghanistan, basically just like they ran from Vietnam. It's been one loss after the other. The neocon projects, they might have authority to launch them. They don't ever have a phase 2 plan. They always end in disaster. Just remember Ashraf Ghani. He sat in the same chair with little Zelensky and said, tell the people everything's fine. We're here for you. We're gonna fight. 1 month later, he was leaving Kabul in his airplane with as much money as he could carry, and it didn't all fit. So he left some right there, on the airport tarmac.
$170 million.
That was left on the tarmac?
No, that he took with him.
He took with him, yeah. So
I could use some of that money. Where is he? Where's he living now? Probably somewhere in the U.S.
No, he showed up in one of the Gulf countries. I'm not sure which.
Billy Bob, got anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I like the point about the precariousness of humanity, and I just want to make clear that it's unnecessary. This is driven totally by the West, and it's very irresponsible. It's very irresponsible. I can't communicate how irresponsible it is to drive us to the point where an accident could end humanity in the world. And it's these people that are doing it, like, I have a visceral hatred for. It's like,
Yes.
you know, they're the worst, but it's the reality. It's the reality we have to deal with. So, I mean, what can we do? What can we do? I think, you know, we just do our best to spread awareness. We want to get as many people as possible, and we can't expect people to be perfect in alignment with all of our cultural and political views. But we can, you know, align with them on our, you know, sane views of saving humanity, pulling us back from the brink of nuclear destruction. And so that's why I support these, you know, big coalition anti-war rallies. Now, like Regis said, this one, a little underwhelming, sure, but it's a start. And I think we need more of that, obviously. So I know there's detractors, but that's a whole another can of worms I'm kind of leading us into, unfortunately. But no, it's like we need to get people angry at this narrow, tiny elite minority who are driving us to the brink of the destruction of humanity unnecessarily. They need to, like Regis said, take their rightful place as one nation among many. You're not exceptional. You're exceptionally shitty, actually. But
What will it
It's
take for
right.
them to learn that?
Right. So I'd like to get back to Transnistria briefly, though I'd really like to discuss the rally too, if we have a minute or two. But I have a question about Transnistria, and I know that our good friend Scott Ritter pronounces Transnistria,
Transnistria,
but
yes.
he's really the authority on it, as far as my mind goes, and maybe that fundamentally racist Colonel McGregor, but my understanding of Transnistria was that the president, who was essentially a figurehead, she was pro Western. She was, and the prime minister was she was more or less pro Russian in the Ukrainian conflict. My question is, look at the geography of this and the way that Russia has approached this war. If they had put on a full scale attack toward Odessa and moved toward Transnistria and landlocked Ukraine, and that, why didn't they anticipate? Since they knew that Transnistria is heavily armed and is almost a warehouse for Russian weaponry. Why didn't they anticipate that move and develop some kind of military answer to it? Anybody?
Well, they might have one. They might have one. We don't know.
Yeah.
They didn't anticipate. They don't have an answer. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But that's the fear. That's the fear that it's just this great cache of ammunition that Ukraine desperately needs, and they can just walk in and grab it, and then Russia's going to have to fight another year longer than they otherwise would. That's the fear. I hope that's not the case. I hope Russia has gamed this out already.
Well, as Regis correctly pointed out, and as I naively believed, that those weapon caches were secure, given the governmental structure that was in place in Moldova at the time. And that's just my naivete, but I just wanted to toss that out. We can discuss the rally if you want. I mean, one of the things I discovered when I looked fairly deeply into who was behind the rally, it was the usual libertarian deregulation money, Koch brothers, Thiel, Scaife. But I also discovered the Mises caucus, the von Mises caucus, which is they're going to take over the Libertarian Party in May at the May meeting of that, and they are fascists. They are out and out fascists. and their first, well, it's always been a consideration of libertarians, but they want to do away with any kind of special protection for minorities in this country, and along with deregulation. And they're already behind all of these efforts to deny African Americans voting rights in all these states, DeSantis, Florida, all the southern states. So my concern is, and I think the African American community avoiding that march was a way of saying no. This now I want to say that the march itself having a chance in a rat's hell of making any goddamn difference in U.S. foreign policy weighed against the number of African Americans and other minorities that will be slaughtered in the United States with probably with the reintroduction of lynching, if the libertarians ever had their way. Then I would say at this point, given the weight you can put behind, you have Max Blumenthal, who's given up on actual journalism and is now a failed comedian, along with his buddy Jimmy Dore leading the whole thing. They're just, I mean, it was ludicrous to even participate in that kind of thing. And what was interesting, that Baraka pointed out, I can't remember his first name. He pointed out that these people are in control. The libertarians are in control of this. They're controlling that. It's not Jimmy Dore. They're just fellow travelers. So I think the fact that it was such a kind of, and the other thing is, I want to say the libertarians are a bunch of phonies. They don't really give a rat's ass about the war. What they care about is political power in this country, and ultimately what they care about is deregulation. And they've been deeply racist ever since I was in college. And they set up tables outside the universities and shoved little women who were arguing with them. Just literally they're poorly socialized males who just went up and shoved women to the ground. I saw that once. But so I really don't have any sympathy. And I don't think ultimately with that attitude toward other human beings that they have, which is like, oh, well, we could just drop everything and let somebody as cruel as the Kochs come in and do away with all unions and just actually don't have any.
So we're gonna extend the show for 2 hours to let Carlo finish.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Carlo.
But anyway, that's my take.
I don't support the Libertarian Party, not in the USA, nowhere else, but I do support the effort of people from all walks of life, all different aspects, saying no to this fucking war. And just so you know, there's going to be a second one, not in the heart of the beast, so not as effective, but maybe impressive in central London. I think this weekend with George Galloway and Max Blumenthal, who you always like to pick on, is going to be there. I'll be watching that. I still think but there needs to be more of this.
That's because he lives in a much better house than I live in.
Yeah,
that's far from where I live.
I love your rants, but yeah, go Regis. We got 2 minutes.
I'd like to share this. I think what we've lost is a sense and the reality of a collective. We're all in this together. And the example that someone shared with me earlier tonight on another interview is Dr. I just drew a
blank. It happens.
Anyway, it'll come to me. He gave the example of Colin Kaepernick, a black African-American quarterback who knelt down during the national anthem. And he said, the problem was the rest of these black athletes were too concerned about protecting their financial situation in life, their comfortable state, rather than the next week, every one of them kneeling down with Colin Kaepernick in support. They lost the sense of the collective. They could have defeated the NFL. They could have won this battle had they stuck together. And I think this directly applies to the situation we find ourselves in today, not only in the United States, but around the world. We've
Globally.
lost the sense of the collective, that we're all in this together. And I think if we are not successful, it'll be because we aren't able to reclaim that sense of one. We're all one on this planet, and unfortunately, we've lost it.
People and community, what a way to end. Thank you very much, Regis.
It was, well, it's always a pleasure being with you guys.
Thanks,
Thanks
Regis.
for
Thanks.
coming on, Regis. Appreciate it.
Very much so.
So I don't think any of us have control of ending the show, but thanks everybody for watching, and we will continue discussion. I'm not sure if the camera's gonna sound or not, but
undoubtedly, Africa is the best tourism destination on Earth. The continent is blessed with the most conducive atmosphere. To feel and enjoy these blessings, join the most productive one-week tour of the continent organized by Daylight Africa every September 2nd to September 9th to see beyond the fallacies about Africa on the mainstream media. Contact us at daylightafrica@gmail.com or call 718-822